Warning, this podcast includes unapologetic logic and reason and may not be suitable for all audiences. In a world full of nonsense, he's been called the voice of uncommon common sense. He sees the abnormal that many find normal. Author and award-winning speaker, he is Chris.
Did you see the photographs and the images of fighting mad Republicans taken to the streets? Did you see this? Millions of people across the Midwest, up into the Northwestern areas, Montana, Wyoming, Oklahoma. People came out of their houses. Republicans saying enough is enough. Did you see any of that? No, I haven't either. It's not what I get at all. I get a couple of you that are a little riled up. Nobody that I talk to. When I talk to Republicans at this point, I get more of a defeated. Defeated. Did we go overboard with putting too much stock and faith in one human being? You know, I was never happy about the weight of the burden that Trump was carrying. Now it's only worse. Now, the process isn't over. Matter of fact, it's well alive. Did you see this is not a joke this time. Republicans are fighting back in real ways, all joking aside. You see the legislative hearings in Pennsylvania? Those are some good Americans out there in the western part of the state. Let me tell you. Some fighting hard Republicans out there. You don't hear much about it. You know, the lamestream media, the fake news. It's funny that anybody can defend it, isn't it? Oh, he called the news fake news. How bad. What are you kidding me? It's a joke. Everybody knows it. There's nothing news about it. I have a theory on all that, where news is going. Theory of news. I don't want to get into it right now, so let me make a note. Kind of bouncing around here on the podcast, different ways of doing things. So you're getting something a little different today. I don't know if you're going to like it or not. I'm sure you'll let me know. Somebody will. Yeah, that's a no-go, or that's a winner. I'm trying to kind of dig deep into what the hell's going on right now, because I'm really trying to get my hands wrapped around it. On one hand, we're waiting. On the other hand, I don't really see a whole lot of bluster behind the idea of Trump standing his ground. At all. At all. Now, is that because I'm not getting out enough? Could be. Could be, because the other thing that came up yesterday, I said about the legislative hearings in Pennsylvania, that was the other day. Yesterday, they were doing the same thing in Nevada. And you should see the way this stuff is getting misreported. Did you hear the president on Sunday morning? They're still talking about that. Why are Republicans and conservatives and people who still believe in our Constitution so defeated? I think there's a couple of different problems going on. I mean, what the big thing that it boils down to is people don't understand what's going on. Right? Nobody knows what to believe anymore. You know, the president says up, everybody else says down, and you're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to be doing here? This purposeful confusion. Tell me it's not by design. How many examples do you need? Let's go to this one. A majority of positive coronavirus cases are from people shopping now. What a bunch of crap. What do they look? It was the filthy bars. What do you need to go to a bar for when there's a pandemic going on? Right? Remember that? They shamed the bars and the bar owners. Still are. Big fights about that. Yep, it was all coming from the bar. The churches, the filthy pews, people sitting all close and breathing the same air. And we knew that, it was adversely affecting the lady stocking the shelves in the store because Joe Biden said so. It's funny, though. I haven't seen any bit of evidence. Speaking of which, remember the first time around? See, not only am I noticing what's going on in the news, I'm noticing what's not going on in the news. Where's the big problem of infections at these meat processing places? Remember that? Remember when the price of chicken went through the roof? There was a rumor that some big Democrat influencer bought up a bunch of meat and had it disposed of purely for the purpose of running up the... I know it's conspiracy theory stuff that I have zero evidence to support. Why would I say it? I don't know. It's interesting to me that this time around that there's no big cases around them. Remember, we were like donating money to the poor people stocking the shelves and Black Lives Matter and the butchers, and nobody should be denied access to health care in a pandemic, even if they're illegal. And, well, not illegal. You can't say that anymore. Where are we going with all this? Is this all just banter back and forth? The bottom line is this. I got into it with the UN agenda. That's what it's being blamed on. Who's the UN? Well, the biggest influencer of that is the United States. So don't think for a second that it's all just a matter of, China and Russia. And I'm not even sure Russia wants in on this thing. I think they're looking at it like you're out of your mind. You're going to give up your national sovereignty to an international government? Meaning, very simply, two simple things come of that, all right? Number one, your tax money could go anywhere in the world, more so than it already does. Number two, you will see new rules and regulations to the extent that you can't possibly fathom that fit a new mold beyond the God-centered, Christ-centered model of morality and government that we have here. That's what it is. It's a God-centered, Christ-centered way of morality, the legal system. It guides the legal system and a way of governance. That's the philosophy. Like it or not. Okay, what do you want to take issue with it? Why? Because it's religious? Because Christ is involved? Because God's involved? We could debate it purely on the merits, but that's not what's happening. It's not what's happening. And I don't know, maybe it's times like these that make you question your faith. What do you say to the whole thing? I mean, what is absolute? Who is completely right? I mean, there's a lot of direction these things can go. I remember being in a church group one time. This is years ago now. Having a conversation about, would you allow a chip to be injected under your skin? Most said yeah. I remember sitting there then, and they had it rationalized, and there's no way to disagree with this. They're like, oh, man, you mean I don't have to carry any keys? I don't have to carry a phone. I don't have to carry a wallet. I don't have to carry money. Yeah, too bad you can't stuff a roll of toilet paper up there, You'd be set for... Some people don't appreciate my sense of humor. I know. I don't want any chips. And then you get into this whole conversation about, where is our way of life headed? Well, we all have choices. You could go buy 100 acres cheap in a lot of different places probably and go live off the land. And I think there's a lot of people that are exercising that option, quite frankly. Do you see new communities pop up? But I don't see much tolerance for that going forward. You go, oh, it's all conspiracy, it's all sci-fi, fictional. What are you talking about? You're talking crazy. What, you think there's going to be this big mind control and people are going to have no rights and we're going to be slaves? And I don't know, man. I don't have a crystal ball and I don't have that kind of vision. I just look at where we're at now. I look at how intrusive government has become in our life, the overburdened taxes and the crappy financial system that's been delivered to us, not because of a bad form of government, not because of a bad system, but because of bad people in it, point blank. I'm not going to sit here and deny for a second that our legal system has not kept up with change. And the other thing I will say is that one weakness of the system is there's no purge mechanism, meaning old laws. You still have these laws on the books that the system becomes very, very, very complicated. Needs to be simplified, especially on the tax front. But, politicians are used to dealing with a whiny, ungrateful constituency that always has their hand out. It's the reality of it. A whiny, entitled, this is the taxpayer in America. How do you think they communicate with their politicians? How do you think those conversations go, typically? For all the money I pay, you think I'd get a little respect down here? I don't know, man. Maybe I secretly wanted to be not a ventriloquist. What's that called when you do the voice actor? I don't know. Impersonator. I don't know. But it's usually confrontational. That's the pressure that politicians, and then they're scared to death. I could go on, but I'm not going to get down this let's feel sorry for the politicians problem. What is the problem right now? The basic problem is that, once again, we've got a government that is so inept at performing even the most basic functions that it should be performing, can't do it effectively and properly. This election mess was long foretold by the likes of people such as myself, such as the president. It's well known that you don't just go in and change the rules midstream without going through the proper process. That's not the way the rules of the game are. Now, the liberals are going to, kick and scream and yell and moan. It didn't affect the outcome of the election. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You broke the rules. You broke the rules, and now it's got to go to the judges to make a decision. In this case, the judges is the House of Representatives. Imagine if Trump didn't win. Has anybody thought that far ahead? Oh, you wait and see the pressure that comes on. You wait and see. Don't think that arriving at the House of Representatives is a magical solution in all this. That's where things start to get dicey. This is the path we're headed on. If I could try to look ahead, that's what you want from me, right? You want me to give you some idea of where I see this going. Well, I can't give you that exactly, but I think one direction it could go. Trump's pushing full steam ahead with his legal approach, as are others. Is not limited to just the president's actions in this. I believe that the president saying that legally they do not have any burden of proof to show that there was a certain number enough to affect the outcome of the election. There's another weird thing, and a buddy of mine was talking to me about this, there's a real oddity in the counties that Biden didn't win, and yet had this, he took less counties than Obama, but got more votes. But isn't that where the Electoral College kicks in? They were playing games with all of the rules. Remember, they were trying to do the multi-state cooperative popular vote, that their electors would go to the popular vote. They had this pact going, and then it dissolved at the last minute. So one thing that we know pretty much for certain in that equation is that they were cooperating. that the Democrat governors or the Democrat states were cooperating amongst each other for political purposes, essentially conspiring against the other states. Oh. Well, that's starting to sound something like a civil war, isn't it? You know, is that going to happen? The states are going to line up and like, this is our vote. You know, I don't see that happening. But Trump's going to keep pushing here's what I see happening. Trump's going to keep pushing his legal angle. It's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court rules favorably, I think that the desired outcome of that cannot be an overturned election. I don't believe that that's what happens. That it then becomes a decision of the House of Representatives. But it's not all of them. What is it? One state, one vote is how that gets decided. So if you have, 10 Republican representatives in Texas and 2 Democrat, and the Democrats, obviously vote in favor of Biden, but that's not how it works. Texas's vote would be, and for however many electoral votes they have, what is it? I don't know, 30, 40. And there's something else I don't want to lose sight of. You want to talk about fighting in the Republican Party. They keep talking about packing the court. Why don't we go on offense? I'm tired of being on defense. I want some Republican leadership to say, why don't you sit down with that pack the court? Because, we're wondering why California has so many electoral votes. It's upsetting the balance in this country. Maybe we need to form a little coalition of Republican states. How about that? I tell you, the unfairness, it's tiring, isn't it? It's very tiring. And I don't know if this defeatist, attitude is weariness. But I feel like there's a lot to go. So let's play this out. So let's say Trump pursues it. He gets it to the Supreme Court. That's where it's headed. The Supreme Court, let's say that they rule favorably and they say it's got to go to the House of Representatives. Presumably, I don't know if there's any deliberation leading up to it. I got to believe there's at least the opportunity for, these politicians. There's no way that they would set up a system that would not provide them an opportunity to run their filthy mouths, stir up more trouble. Am I right? Casio brain cortex. Well, she'll do it outside if she has to. And what Republicans are trying to do is steal the election. Right? So they're going to stir up their trouble. This is where this goes as I see it. We win. Now we got to go for a vote. There's going to be some period of time leading up to that. Hopefully very, very short, because that's where I see the sweet spot. That tipping point potential. Remember I talked about that? Here we are. That was a big series I did on this podcast. That brought in a lot of you. A lot of you came in listening to this podcast because you found that. And somehow the link to that brought in untold free traffic to this podcast. It was great. It was just an idea I had. I just did it. I put together there was a message I wanted to get out about the danger that we were facing. I said there would be a tipping point, likely near the election. So now here we are. I could never have predicted this. I really couldn't. Holy cow. This is far worse than I ever imagined. I'm not kidding. So, you don't look, I don't have a crystal ball. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. But look at the recent past. What do Democrats do? They turn to the streets and it turns violent. And then they try to convince you it's not violent. Like they just spew out crap on this virus. Majority of positives coming from people shopping. California lockdown order likely. I just saw the World Health Organization director. World Health Organization, he's not our friend, right? He said lockdowns are bad. Lockdowns are bad, but California's going to lock down anyway. So you got to ask yourself, why would progressive California be going against, the ultimate progressive organization, especially right now, the World Health Organization? I am starting to wonder if there is not some thinking that there will be unrest or pushing things to the point of unrest, one way or the other, maybe both. I don't understand how the governors, they've got to be getting a gajillion tons of pressure to not be shutting down. I mean, retail is dying. I think there's an article I have somewhere on to talk about this. Where'd it go? They were talking about this mall development in East Rutledge, New Jersey, which is a pretty affluent area up there. We should have heard the way they described this mall. Not that far from me, maybe 2 hours away. We go up there every once in a while. Not lately. Anyway, this mall had an indoor ski run. I'm like, what? I guess it's a hub. People up there ski, so maybe you buy skis and you can test them out. Indoor ski run. I mean, where does it end? In the mall. And there was I'm giving you like the tip of the iceberg here. Well, anyway, they opened this thing up like in March, and COVID has killed retail. So what's going to happen with that? What are the long-range financial implications of this kind of devastation? We haven't seen it yet. Well, we know it's at least $3 trillion and counting, because that's the amount that they bought in for right out of the gate. And somewhere along the line, after this election's figured out, we're going to buy in for some more. We'll be into this for $5 trillion, no problem. I think that's the new math. That's what it takes to keep propping up the fiat money system. That's the level we're at. But $5 trillion bonus every 10 years or so. However you want to do it. You want to do it virus, you want to do it civil unrest, you want to do it a war, whatever it takes. Keep that money. Keep the bankers happy. It's not really about keeping the bankers happy or not. It's about a system that's designed to fail, the financial system. I tell you, I studied this for a long, long time. And you get into some really, really educated minds in the area of economics and the economy and finance. And there's all these different kind of sub-theories out there. But I try to sort through all that, and I'm like, because we used to be concerned about the debt. But now we're not even concerned about it at all. I mean, in fact, it seems like it's like a race to spend as much as we can as soon as we can. It's like the only thing the government is good at right now, literally. Not the only thing, but not a lot more. And I don't know, taking it from that point, I don't know. A lot of different directions that these things can go. What was I going to say earlier? I was talking about the COVID government. Oh, man, I'm losing my mind. Purposeful confusion. It's affecting me, too. It's making me crazy. All right, what else we got going on here? I'm losing my mind. New York, that's not the COVID cough. New York implements emergency hospital measures. Measures as COVID cases surge. Here we go again in New York. Governor Cuomo says we hit a real hospitalization crisis. We're now worried about overwhelming the hospital system. Hospitals now need to identify retired nurses and doctors. We're already experiencing staff shortages. So what they'll do, I guess, is go back to retired people. Emergency measures. It could implement a regional New York pause, which is basically a stop. He added, number one priority, assuring the state has enough hospital capacity to treat all patients. We are now worried about overwhelming the hospital system. First, hospitals need to identify retired nurses and doctors, adding they're already experiencing staff shortages. I don't know what that means. They don't really go into explaining it that much. State is mandating load balancing of patients, meaning they're forcing people to move. I'm sure that's a real joy. How many arguments and stress is that causing? Imagine your parent is in the hospital, and that's not limited to COVID, right? You go in for whatever, get your gallbladder. Mom goes in for a gallbladder, and they're like, "Oh, we're moving." What do you mean you're moving her? Oh, we're moving her to Buffalo. What do you mean you're moving her to? Not really, but it may as well be Buffalo when you got to deal with the dog and the kids and your job, and now you got to go to Buffalo to see your mother in the hospital, and you got to, you know what I mean? You don't know the doctors out there. There's no way I'm sending her out there. I don't know the arguments. It's probably ended marriages at this point. Let's see. Burned out doctors warned of catastrophe. So then there was this story on Fox News on Sunday morning. Bartiromo, however you say her name, center of controversy after crazy Trump interview. I listened to some of the interview. I didn't find it to be crazy at all. I found it to be very logical, very coherent. Am I sounding irrational? Here's the argument. I want to make sure you plainly understand it. It's a very simple argument, and the argument is this: that election rules were changed by governors and or judges, or both, but not by the state legislature as required, COVID or not. Bottom line. There was ample time. Nobody's really said that COVID is the excuse, because it's not the excuse. There was plenty of time between March and the election in November for Democrats to take their brazen scheme in front of the legislature, who in Pennsylvania would have promptly laughed them out of the state. Instead, the Democrats chose to have their cake and eat it too. They enjoyed the political benefit of the lockdown, as well as helping them reshape the election rules to best suit their needs. Case in point, I used the argument the other day, or the analogy of showing up to play cards, and you're showing up to play 5-card stud and you get 4 cards. Actually, I got that backwards. In this case, it's like showing up and there's 6. And you say, wait a minute, right? More ways to vote. If you think of the cards as ways to vote. Everybody's going, hey, what are you so sourpussed about? We're getting more cards to play with. You know, if you're going to get the same cards we're all going to get. If you're not afraid to play your hand, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is everything. Nothing is done that way and accepted as fair. Imagine showing up at the Super Bowl and it's a 90-yard field and you're like, what the? Yeah, because of COVID and social distancing, we had to make the field a little shorter. And you're like, what are you talking about, man? Listen, by comparison, think about that a second. If that happened, if you tune in to watch the Super Bowl, and I know some of you will, I won't be, enjoy. I hope you choke on it. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I got to tell you, I'm having a harder and harder time supporting stuff that I know is purely destructive to our country. Am I going to be left as a hermit on a hillside? Certainly appears to be headed that way. You make your choices, I'll make mine. Imagine you go to tune into the Super Bowl and you're like, hey, honey, you've had a couple of cocktails and you rub your eyes and you're like, hey, is there a freaking... Are we missing 10 yards or is it me? And your buddy's on the couch with chili spilling down the front of his shirt. And after a long pull on his Pabst, he lets out a big burp and he goes, you know what? That's not a 100-yard field. And then they're like, well, listen, it's going to be better for everybody. This is the best analogy. This I should make a video of. Okay? It's going to be better for everybody. The field's going to be shorter, right? You won't have to run as far. We'll have more scoring. It'll be more exciting. There'll be more ballots to count. Okay. All right. Let's give it a go. All right. So now you have to punt. All right. Well, that's disappointing, because you really wanted to get the ball the first time through. But, you got to take it as it comes, right? New rules. Everything's all right. All right. We didn't get out of the gate, but we're in the game. Your kicker comes out, and because he's used to playing on a 100-yard field, he launches the ball out of the stadium. And so the refs bring the ball out, not on the 20-yard line now because you're 10 yards shorter, but now it's out like where the 30 would normally be. And you're on defense opening the Super Bowl. And you're like, wait a minute. Hold on a second. And they're like, no. This is the new rules. I don't know how to explain it any other way. I could explain it from a constitutional perspective. It's right there in plain English. You don't need me to read it to you. Go research Constitution/elections. And then go look at your state statute. I did mine. See what it calls for and what it's not, what it doesn't call for. This is what the Democrat Party is bringing to the game unapologetically. It's not a conspiracy. I don't know how much clearer to say this. I talked about the UN stuff. Last week, I talked about the bills that are currently sitting in Congress. Well, they don't have enough votes for that yet. They're like sharks circling the boat at this point. Right now, they're getting ready to take down Trump in a big way. And either way, what do you think happens? Either we go peacefully or they beat us into submission a little further. Look, I'm not worried. Everybody's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to keep doing what I do. I position I gave all the warnings I could. I gave all the advice I could. I'm sitting here at this point and I'm like, I'm good. Vietnam reports its first locally transmitted case in 89 days. Do you believe that? Like, what are we, idiots here? Like, what are you going to tell me they're cleaner in Vietnam? Not possibly. I don't know. You know what it might be, actually? See, I know a Vietnamese woman. I'm sure Vietnam is, somewhat broad in its culture. I don't think it's all one culture. I don't know. Never been there. But, they're not the germaphobes like we are here, especially with food. Tequila bar applies to become a church to skirt the lockdown rules. Oh, I saw somebody posted on Twitter, some reporter, looking to make a name for herself. I guess she stalked out these churches or somehow found out they were having church and went out there with cameras and turned them in. Unbelievable. Now you know who the first traitor is. But we don't keep lists. All right, speaking of Twitter, here's a couple messages I got. This is from Tulsi. She says, how about patriots do our own version of the deep state? The covert organization to combat the globalist, Democrat, rhino media, Silicon Valley elites. Well, I don't think the deep state is organized in a fashion the way people think it is. Look, and I'm actually glad you brought this up, Tulsi, because there's something interesting to consider in all this. How the hell does any sane person work in that environment? What am I talking about? Well, you've got White House staff and whatnot, and they're in there for 4 years, and now they don't know if they're coming or going. These positions involve a lot of networking, a lot of collaboration, a lot of long-term vision thinking, and we get none of that because of this political rat race. I know nobody's going to sit here and feel sorry for anybody working in government right now, but I got to imagine that being in the White House is just not a good time. Not a good time. This is from INFJ, INFJ. Man, it's crazy times. Taxpayers made our elected officials extremely wealthy while they corrupted our elections and stole our votes long before Trump was even president. This time they got caught. Well, they certainly had somebody who was willing to stand up and say no to it, ironically. Like, does anybody not think that Hillary stole the nomination away from Bernie Sanders? Like, Democrats are acting like there's, the question of legitimate elections has never been brought up before. Like it's a new idea to suggest that there's corruption in Detroit. Yeah, nobody ever had that idea. No, well, Detroit, no, solid as a rock. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Ronnie says, on this last Sunday in November, let us give thanks for what we have, despite what 2020 has left us throughout. And let us pray that one amazing good thing can still happen to us in this election as we seek truth and justice. All right. We can pray, we can do this, we can give thanks. Amen. Okay, so pray for the country. That's good, Ronnie. Liz says, it's mind-boggling to me that Durham didn't release his report before the election. Listen, Durham subscribers, conspiracy subscribers, and I don't mean that to be negatively. Simple question. Do you not think that the people capable of orchestrating things at this scale that would have the tenacity to be so audacious to take at such a scale, do you not think that people with such corrupted minds would have enough sense to at least do what they could to somewhat cover their tracks? Of course they would. And here's the problem. I was talking to a friend of mine about this. I happen to know the former regional director of the SEPTA regional rail line here. Really charismatic guy. Nice position, by the way, working for the railroad. I think he made about $400,000 a year. It's like a 15-year pension or something like that. And I think medical for life. And I don't know about his position in particular, but it's pretty common in those high-level rail positions that what they do is they retire and then they go work. I think they have to retire by railway rules or something. It's a different pension they fall under. They don't pay Social Security when they work for the railroad. And but anyway, the top level at the railroad, it's common that they will then go work for one of the consulting firms that work for the railroad. And on one hand, you could look at that and you'd be like, that is corrupt as all get out. Like, we just paid that guy, $400,000 a year. Now he's getting a full pension. And now on top of that, he's going to get down here to, schmuckatelli engineers and make $250 for another 5 years. And, some of these people are pulling in some serious coin from some of these jobs. Look into, especially if you're in a big city. See, nobody looks into this stuff because we don't have a new journalism anymore. Go look at what the superintendent of schools in Philadelphia makes. It's obscene, the packages they're getting. Obscene. But anyway, they'll go work for these consultant firms. There's really nothing that you can do to stop that. Is there a possibility for abuse? Of course, you get a wink and a promise and, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. I don't know. In some ways it's good, right? Because you say, okay, we're using an engineer that's staffed with people with direct experience of what we're talking about. They're staying in the industry. So and this is not uncommon to government, to academia. I hate that word. I hear academia. She's working in academia. Let me tell you, I better stop. Where was I? Some of these industries become very ancestral. Bottom line. Media is another one. And I definitely think it's time for some fresh blood on all fronts. I really do. I really do. You should run for office, I'm telling you. So here's a couple of things I saw. Ilhan Omar, you know her. Ilhan Omar, representative to the United States Congress. How about that? We must put an end to this economic crisis with direct monthly payments to every family, expanded unemployment benefits, rent and mortgage cancellation, student debt cancellation, Medicare for all, including free COVID treatment and vaccines. That's what we're selling our Constitution for. Rent and mortgage cancellation. What is the cost of that? No, you say, well, no, they're going to cancel. It's not going to cost you anything. It's a great deal. Why would anybody vote Democrat? You know, it's like the guy that tells you, don't light a lighter in front of like an aerosol can, like I make it a flamethrower, but everybody does it anyway. I'm on a roll today. I'm like on a quiet roll, right? This is Charlie Kirk. He says the activist, listen to this, is a good point he makes. The activist media has spent more time covering Joe Biden's broken foot than the credible allegations of voter fraud. The media spent more time talking about Joe Biden's foot. I think the media made a mistake in thinking that they were going to silence Trump. He won't be silenced. Here's what I was talking about with the counties. I didn't fact check this. You can check it for yourself. Biden lost 212 more counties than Obama did in 2012. Biden won 477 counties versus Obama won 689 counties. But Biden has 13 million more votes. And people are saying, that ain't possible. Well, it could be that they said, hey, I'm not going to go to the polls, but I'll be happy to fill that thing out for you and send it in. Is it not? But they changed the rules. And by changing the rules, I mean, look, what's a better example of what I'm talking about? Not a team sport, but a contest. They changed the rules. Say the 1 mile race, right? And you shorten it to 0.9 miles, whatever the best analogy is, or you lengthen it to 1.5 miles. And you say it gives you 6 laps to pass them, so everybody should be better off. And you're like, no, man, we came for a 1 mile race. No, there was no public debate on the mail-in voting. There was no vote. There was no process, no nothing. It was just a dictatorial governor thinks he's going to wave his pen and change the election, not for the benefit of anybody but his party. Come on. Oh, no, we did it for COVID safety. Every vote must count. It's like a bad version of Batman playing out in real time. Watch as I twist the vote regulations. And mayhem across the land, exactly as I predicted. Mark my words, I've been talking about this a little while. The pinch point is going to be coming. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope nothing. But, I don't know how, if we get through a Supreme Court decision to say that, hey, this is an illegitimate election, you're coming out of a vote with somebody unhappy. Can you imagine if Trump loses? What do Trump supporters say? Well, at that point, we don't have much of an argument, procedurally speaking. At that point, you're talking about other options, which for me, I would, if people were serious about that, which they're not, I would not advocate for any violence. I would advocate for a peace strike situation, a monetary strike. All Republican businesses shut down. These are tough decisions. Stop paying taxes, that kind of thing. You want to send a message? Get a million businesses to send their tax checks to Russia or something like that. Or, I don't know. Send it to a different entity. And if the states start pulling together, that's where that comes unraveled. And, you know, as much as at this point separating the country seems like a plausible idea, I'll remind you that we're pretty intertwined, us Republican and Democrats. It's pretty hard to pull apart. It didn't happen the first time. Lincoln advised against it. He wanted unity within the country, and we need a unifier right now. We need somebody to stand up and we need a statesman to stand up and plainly explain to the people what the real leftist agenda looks like in plain English. Here's what it's going to look like to you, and take people down that path and remind them of it. You know, this country and what it was founded on, it is unique. And whether or not you want to accept the divinity of it or not, it provided a level of freedom that was never before seen in the world. There's never been anything like it. A country never seen before in creation with untold freedom, with a government of the people, by the people, and a constitution, an ironclad guarantee to preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all men who are created equal, endowed by their Creator. And they began attacking from the bottom up. Creator. And all of a sudden you go, whoa, wait a minute. I remember having this argument in the 80s. There was like this push to take creation theology out of the public school books, and they argued and they fought for that. And we said, well, maybe it's better. Maybe it's better we just teach that stuff in church. But then nobody was going to church. And you say, well, everybody has their own beliefs. It'll be okay. And look at how that's tracked over the past 3 decades. And look at where we're headed. It's like this concept of human nature, humanity, and proper government have escaped us for now because there's been a great deception. Now, I've also said this. All is not for naught. You know, we live in a time of untold access to information, technology, and resources in general. Phenomenal. Despite that, you see large-scale failures, things that have to be attended to differently. There are some brilliant ideas. I have some ideas about solar and where it could head, but it would require some kind of mutual cooperation. And that's really hard to get in a capitalist system. And I think there's a group of people in the middle that are going, well, you know, I mean, in places where solar does work, we have some solar lights on the property for you, by the way. Interesting little test. And they haven't lit over the past, they go on for like a half hour. And Jen looked at me and, you know, told me what an idiot I was. Well, duh, there's been no sun. I'm like, well, there's been some sun. I mean, the fact that it's performing at, you know, less than 10% of its capability tells me that it would be really hard to generate enough power to power a house. Can't even keep the low voltage deck lights on. I know it's a different system and all that, but my point is this. They've done some tests in Costa Rica where the solar has worked out fantastic. Southern California, I believe in Florida, and other places around the world. And it's great. Locally generated green energy, there's some trade-offs. It ain't going to work so well in Buffalo, that's all I'm telling you. But you can't even get to the point of having these conversations. You can't even get to the point of having a conversation. You know, one of the areas of expertise that I enjoy, don't ask why, is in the area of stormwater runoff, downstream flooding, you might call it. And I believe a big fiasco with this climate change BS is really a way to free up funding for these drainage problems. And you say, what am I talking about? Well, the city of Philadelphia surrounds the Schuylkill River and the Delaware River, where the Schuylkill enters the Delaware River. however many millions of properties there are in the city of Philadelphia, the city gets built out, the roads are built, the houses are built, and a certain amount of water runs off a lot faster than it did back in the day when it was a swamp or fields or woodland or whatever Philadelphia was at that time, or all the above probably. And over time, what do people do? Well, they add a little piece of patio, they add a little walk, they add a little deck, they add a little shed, and they're adding more of this impervious area. And you say, what are you telling me? That I can't have a shed? This is the environmental fight versus the unenvironmental. The problem is that because there's a million sheds now, it's contributing to the flooding of the Schuylkill River. And the average person sitting there picking their nose like, I don't get it. I try to insult everybody pretty evenly today. I think I'm doing pretty well, thank you. So my point is, I look at this and I'm like, and I don't know if this is the true or not. Like I'm like, why this climate change thing? Well, it could just be you have evil people that are hell-bent on destroying the world, and that may be it. I don't know. But it's this inability for this simple level of cooperation. And then when they want to do it, globally, when there's sustainable development, where you're going to have, a group of, what's the Microsoft guy, Bill Gates people sitting up there. Well, we're going to limit the size of all decks in your geographic region 5, sub-area 4. Your deck can only be 4 square feet by 4 square feet, and you've got to borrow it with your neighbor, share it with your neighbor. You will get bizarre regulations that limit. And then this idea of, mortgage cancellation. I mean, they're just going to forgive it? Tell me more. I have a mortgage. Oh, no, they're going to take the deed, buddy. They're going to own it. And let me tell you something. I guess I don't know what the grand scheme is. They don't tell us. They don't give us all the answers. They want to own everything, have control over everything. But it'll fail under its weight before it even gets too far. And at some point in that process, the sheepdogs will have to come in and chase out the wolves, if you know what I'm saying. Hey, it's been a great day. It's not been a tumultuous Tuesday. What can I tell you? It's a little relaxed. Got a lot to process, a lot going on. You got to keep your head on straight today, and you really got to work hard to take care of yourself. I want to tell you something. Make sure that you're monitoring yourself, that you're thinking carefully about your choices, especially the ones that you repeat every day, because it's those things that you say, well, I just have a little ice cream here, a little ice cream there. And just like the story of the sheds, it all adds up big time over time. Those little things that you do every day. People say to me, how do you speak so well? It's so natural to you. I've done it so many times over and over and over again, that repetition. This is the case with anybody. And it works in both directions. It either makes you better or it breaks you down. This is the way of habits. So choose yours carefully. Something to think about. God willing, I'll be back tomorrow. Sure hope to see you there. Make it a great day.